Why are used Teslas so cheap and why you shouldn't buy one. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. We'll start with the marketplace. Well, there's a few local dealers that have been charging outlandish prices. I've even seen some dealers where they're marking up their Model S's like this, 1 and 2 year old vehicles. They're marking them over sticker price of a brand new one. That's outlandish. Why would you possibly pay more for a used vehicle than you would for a brand new? As a matter of fact, did you know these Teslas here, we're talking about the Model 3, that's the smaller vehicle that we're looking at right here. They have gone down an average of 30% in value on the used car market this year. Tesla is also revealing that there's a new Tesla Model 2 coming out in short order, likely to come out at the end of 24 or 2025. And when that comes out, that's going to be a lower price point and it's going to get more people into that dollar range. And it's going to push those slightly higher priced vehicles that are in the depreciation curve even further down and hamper that used car price even further. And on top of that, the incentives to buy brand new Teslas are far too great to ignore. And all it does is continually push down and hamper the used car prices. This is the Tesla Model 3. Did you realize they've just revealed in Europe and in certain markets, they're actually revealing a new restyle that gets better fuel economy, better coefficient of drag, as well as a better price point. Here we have the Model Y, guaranteed that's going to be following suit with some restyle and some updates as well. And then we have the Model S here, and they've been cranking the price knock on these two vehicles. And of course the Model X, which is the larger of the SUV, those are the two more upscale Teslas, and they've gone down as much as 20% in price incentives from brand new. That's right, Tesla's making some hard adjustments because they're trying to compete with some of the new players in town. We've got Audi producing a car, we've got Mercedes producing, Porsche Taycan, even the lower cost vehicles from Kia and Hyundai are putting out vehicles that are pure EV, that are providing much better competition, that are continually going to hamper and hurt the used car segment for Tesla. To make matters worse, things are ramping up. Obviously, even Elon has advertised and mentioned that he's concerned. He's concerned with the sales of a lot of these vehicles. Teslas have been taking a little bit of a hit this year in general, even on the new car segment, which trickles down to used, just because of inflation. Obviously, people don't have the money that they had 2 or 3 years ago, and now we're in a place where high inflation, high interest rates are causing the push for manufacturers to create more affordable vehicles, and honestly, most of those are going to be internal combustion. The electrified marketplace is going to come for an increased cost, so people just can't afford it. It's even worse when you're talking about a used vehicle. If you get yourself a slightly used Tesla Model S or X, you could be in a real world of hurt where you're upside down on the price of that vehicle, and you're definitely going to be in a rough spot financially. And I've also done some pricing on some older Teslas. You look at the earlier generation Tesla Model S right here. I've looked at some of them that were, much more early generation Teslas, and they sort of have a different depreciation curve. Most traditional vehicles, internal combustion, tend to see a hard depreciation from that first 1 to 3 years. By the time you're at year 4 or 5, you're down to 50%, and then it's leveled off and it kind of stays there as long as it's not a total dog of a car. But Tesla, on the other hand, is a little bit different. These early generation Tesla Model S's lose about 10 grand consistently year over year over year, meaning, in other words, you see this linearity here to that depreciation, which just basically means there's no relief from depreciation. If anything, it starts to slowly accelerate on depreciation as it gets up there in 7, 8 years of age, just because now most owners know that the length of the battery life is definitely going to run out really, really soon. We're talking 8 to 10 years, maybe 12 if you're lucky, and then we're dealing with a replacement of batteries that might be in the tune of $20,000 to $25,000. So let's just assume you actually want to own a Tesla. Could you actually imagine spending more money for a used one with 10,000 kilometers on it than you would for a brand new one? That's right, Tesla has been constantly undercutting their used car market. Technically, the last several months, they've been chopping their prices 2%, 5%, 10%. Like I said, now we're at about 19%, 20% total that they've chopped the price of some of the vehicles, specifically on the Model X like we're looking at here, and the Model S beside it. Those cars are much better value to buy brand new. And I've literally looked on the website. Tesla's site says you can have that car within 2 to 3 months. So the long wait times are no longer there. So the value of buying a used one just isn't there. I mean, new, if you have to have it, that's the way to buy it. But to buy one that's 3 or 4 years old, it literally has no value add there. We also can't forget that Tesla has gone through a lot of quality control problems, paint problems, fitment issues. I mean, there's been a lot of troubles with problems like this, with panel gap issues and paint problems throughout. We also have technology issues there, as well as firmware update issues, glass breakage problems. We also had a lot of bolts and hardware in the suspension not quite tight from the factory, from brand new. So there's been a lot of quality control issues on a lot of earlier generation Teslas, just because the lower volume of production. And other problems like moisture in the headlights, like these ones right there. There's been a lot of problems and conversation around some of the quality control in general with some of the earlier generation Teslas. So as we know, even here, as you could see, this panel gap here, we're tighter on that side than we are on this side. So things have changed and they're getting better with time, but that's the problem. Going out and buying yourself a 5, 6, 7-year-old Tesla, you know that there's a lot of challenges with some of the quality control, even the build and fit and finish. It's not all just about the programming. So buying a used Tesla, you're still buying into some of those older teething issues. That's what's literally going to be a bit of a problem for you. Yes, they're getting better with newer generations, but again, getting into a used one, you're guaranteed going to bite off more than you could probably chew. And over here we have a pickup truck. This is conventional internal combustion engine. We have a V8 engine in there and it uses fuel right here. And so as we open this up, here's the next situation that Tesla's starting to encounter. Of course, right here. Put your gas in there, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Everybody knows that gas at the pump, a big part of that is the tax to pay for the roads. That's right, the vehicles that drive on those roads right there, that is to cover the wear and tear on the roads. But we all know that for the longest time, Tesla owners felt that, hey, we're exempt. We don't pay road tax because we don't put fuel in, so we can stay away from that problem. But guess what? There's many states even starting to incorporate taxation on the use of electric vehicles. That's right, they're talking about applying a tax, installing GPS equipment. They're talking about actually sending a bill for your use and the amount of miles you put on because you're pounding out the asphalt like everybody else has with the conventional ICE engines. But for the longest time, a lot of people thought that we can get away from that and avoid a lot of that taxation. But that is coming to a close because a lot of government officials know that they don't want to be ripped off from taxes. If there's one thing that's certain, death and taxes, okay, two things. And the reality is they want their piece and they're going to get it out of an electrified vehicle too. So don't think that that's going to be a thing that you can avoid it, because that's coming to a doorstep near you. And right there's the next reason why you shouldn't buy a used Tesla. Why is that? Well, it's an electric vehicle, right? Okay, electric motors, and it's got batteries. And it's the batteries in this vehicle that are quite pricey to replace. We know that one cell can be replaced and you can replenish the majority of the cells, but the reality is there is a limited finite lifespan of these battery cells that you'll find in these cars. Now, Tesla actually warrants these, at least in the Canadian market, for 8 years. That's right, you can get a new set of batteries up to and including 8 years. But they're not going to just last 8 years. You can get 80-90% of capacity holding on for 8 or 9 or 10 years. And then after 10 to 12 years, you're gonna find yourself below that capacity threshold and you might be in need of a set of batteries. If you need to do a swap out on a set of batteries for these cars after 10 or 12 years, that could be $20,000, $25,000 to do a full retrofit. We won't talk about electric motors if they go. Clearly, there's not a lot of mechanics going on with these cars, but when the batteries alone there goes, then you're dealing with probably at least $20,000 tab to replace that. If you buy a used Tesla, all you're doing is counting the ticking time bomb moments till when it actually lets go and boom, and then you're done with the cheap operating costs, because that's when you have to put your dollars back into the car. Sure, you don't have to rebuild an engine or do oil services, but when you have to put $20,000 or even 15 grand into a set of batteries after 10 years, all of the costs of service and maintenance, oil changes, coolant flushes, brake flushes, all of those parts that come with standard internal combustion engines, all of that cost savings is gone because you've put it all into the replacement batteries. So as you get further down the road, get a car that's 6 or 7 or 8 years of age, What do you think that means? That means you're on a ticking time bomb moment and the turbo sled to huge expense repairs. You may in fact have to incur some of the huge costs that go out to replace some electrified parts. So the bottom line is, as they get older, the depreciation hits them even harder. Battery costs, everybody knows it's coming, and it's just going to cost you. Another thing to think about, a lot of people just want a new car, but maybe they can't quite afford that brand new Tesla, so they're thinking of getting into one because it's used, right? Seems sensible. Wrong. See, because when we're talking about the 1 to 5 year depreciation curve, as I mentioned, we're talking 10% year on year, you're starting to lose a pretty drastic value in that vehicle. Sure, but you're also losing the lifespan of that vehicle too. So if you're dealing with a 5-year-old Tesla thinking, hey, I'll get into that for about half of its value, now where does that put you? If you're dealing with a base Model X and you think, okay, I'll buy a 5-year-old Model X and I'll save all that money. If we're talking about a $100,000 car, after 5 years, we might be dealing with $60,000, in which case most people are going to start thinking about the other alternative, hybrids. They can get into a manufacturer like a Toyota Highlander hybrid or some other manufacturer that has a long-standing history of reliability. They also don't have to deal with range anxiety. They get some of the benefits of the electrification where they're putzing around town and they're able to save a pile of money on gas just cruising around town, but they don't get stuck, hung up in that little town in the middle of nowhere, waiting for 2-3 hours to get their car charged up, or heaven forbid, they can't even get a charger or find one that's functioning properly. So a lot of times people are just better off settling for a brand new hybrid rather than going with a used Tesla to satisfy the same need. Another reason why used Teslas may not be the answer, the increasing improvements in the battery technology. Technology, manufacturing costs are all getting better. Of course, dealers like this, where you don't have to buy through the dealer, you can buy directly from the manufacturer, is going to save Tesla money and give you options, potentially. But what that means is those costs are going to be more and more aggressive, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to get into a brand new Tesla. Remember, we're in the early generations of getting into the electrified market. All the other manufacturers are trying to compete with this too. It's going to continue pushing down the market price and the value of a brand new Tesla, just like this little Model X right here. But when that happens and the new car prices come down because of better batteries, easier manufacturing costs, what do you think that does on the used car market? Continually push it down, and it seems like a great place to get in. But again, that aggressive depreciation gets hampered strictly by because the batteries and the cost of keeping these vehicles on the road after 7 or 8 years, once the batteries start losing their capacity. Now there's finally competition in the marketplace. This used to be a one-trick pony, and there was no other game in town other than Tesla if you want to get into the electrified market. Tesla is all about stripped down and bare bones, and some people love that minimalist approach, but not everybody does, and there's some great options out there. So instead of spending the big dollars and you're getting into 6 figures buying one of these vehicles, you can actually look at some of the other manufacturers. Hyundai, Kia are building electrified vehicles. Chevy started doing that, although they sort of put a halt on that because of the costs, and they know that there's going to be significant prices attached to manufacturing these batteries, so they put a little bit of a halt on that. But the reality is there's still some brands out there that give you options. I mean, Audi is another brand, Porsche Taycan's a version as well. And of course, Mercedes with the EQE and the EQS as well as the EQB puts a little fear in the heads of the manufacturers like Tesla when they know there's somebody nipping at the heels, because a lot of these other brands are developing these electrified vehicles as well. And then it leaves you wondering, do I need to buy a new Tesla, even a used? Why bother? Hey, there's some other brands out there. Let's go take a look at the EQB by Mercedes. There's another great reason not to buy a used Tesla. Look at this equipment that has to be installed here. We have all of this big piece of hardware. We have a transformer here. We have more equipment here to run these superchargers here. Of course, these are made for Tesla, and of course, there's going to be an increasing need for this type of equipment all over like this if you're going to continue developing and selling electric cars. This is another big transformer that you need more and more power like this to bring to these facilities in order to run and charge all these electric cars. So all that extra infrastructure is going to cost. Doesn't matter if you're buying a new Tesla or a used Tesla, it's going to cost you to set all that up. Some people have to upgrade their services in their home. Some people only have a 60 amp service at home and they have to upgrade to 100 amp. It might need further trenching underground. It might mean the local utilities have to carve underground and bring larger wires, bigger breaker, upgrade your panel, mount the equipment outside the house. It might also also mean that the big utilities, the ones that carry power at high voltage across the country and take it from the generating plants out to the major substations, those are going to have to be upgraded. But guess what? I've talked to many people in the business development of some of these local utilities, and they're all saying that a lot of these mandates are getting pushed out, and they're saying there's no way we can hit these targets of 2035, that they're going to push them out to 2050 at least. And even with that, that's just a shot in the dark and a number that they're just putting out there that likely they're not even going to make that target. So clearly infrastructure is not going to be there. And as an owner of an electric vehicle, specifically on the used car segment, you're thinking about money and costs, and to upgrade and put that service into your home is going to cost you extra money. If you weren't mandated and you weren't told by the government and all these regulators out there, would you be an early adopter, or would you prefer just to drive an internal combustion engine until you retire and call it a day? I don't know. Personally, I'd rather have the choice and not have to deal with all these pushy politicians. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that video. That's 2024's best SUVs on the market. Hope to see each and every one of you in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.